Hello, everybody. Welcome back to HeartBrief, your weekly update on some of the most important medical literature that's come out. Brought to you by me, Joel Kahn, medical doctor, preventive cardiologist, triple board certified in Detroit and southeastern Florida. So hopefully everybody got through this extreme cold in okay shape. Certainly being in Florida was a little bit of an advantage. Don't hate me. Here we go. Let's talk about some big, and interesting studies that came out this week. And I think we're going to start with a simple one, but boy, what an elegant study. In a very advanced journal or prestigious journal called Nature Communications, published January 14th, 2026. If you notice, it actually took 2 years to get this paper published. It's so sophisticated and so deep. But the topic was how good is cholesterol lowering and metabolic syndrome mediation with oatmeal, and how does it work through the GI tract in a very specific way, a randomized controlled trial. Very interesting study. And if you read it, it goes back to a paper, and I believe 1909, where oatmeal was used to lower cholesterol for the first time. And then we jumped to the 1960s when there was more research. But there is a bit of a controversy. If you're at all on social media, you'll see bloggers and influencers talk about how oatmeal should be for horses. It's not human food. How it's a terrible food, which I completely disagree. Generally, the number one recommendation to heart patients, how about a nice steel cut oatmeal in the morning with walnuts and cinnamon and perhaps raisins. And some people do it savory with spinach and rosemary and thyme and oregano, and some people put olive oil in their oatmeal. There's all kinds of things. Some people eat oatmeal for lunch and dinner. So that actually is topical here. And of course, oats have a special kind of fiber called beta glucan. They have minerals, they have vitamins, a lot of reasons. So they did a study where for 2 days in healthy volunteers compared to a control group, um, people ate 3 meals a day of oatmeal. That's all they ate was oatmeal, and they survived without problems. Then for the next 6 weeks, they ate one large meal a day of oatmeal and the other meals they could choose, or there was a control group where they left everything alone. There were 34 participants, 15 males, 19 females, average age of 60, BMI of 32. And they did meet criteria for the metabolic syndrome. In fact, 100% of them had central obesity, along with other traits that make up the metabolic syndrome. So I'll go back. This is a very long and detailed paper. But what it showed was that oatmeal indeed does lower cholesterol. Honestly, that's a well-established fact. Some people actually feel that oat bran lowers cholesterol even more than oatmeal. And that was very popular in the 1980s with a book called The 8-Week Cholesterol Cure, when half of America was making oat bran muffins to lower their cholesterol. And it works, maybe about 10 or 15%. There were other features to the 8-Week Cholesterol Cure book that was so popular, written by, if I remember, a Mr. Kowalski. But what they did identify in this very advanced study was that there's a mechanism of increasing your oat intake that affects your microbiome favorably, and you make more phenolic compounds. You can see the word phenolic in the title of the paper, particularly one called ferulic acid. Plasma ferulic acid, FA levels rose, cholesterol levels fall. The microbiome had indications that it was getting healthier and healthier. There wasn't any particular weight loss. There wasn't any massive blood pressure lowering impact. There was cholesterol lowering impact, some blood sugar lowering impact, and a microbiome lowering impact. So we have a very sophisticated study, and I'll just show you if you stick with me for a minute. If you go, and now this study wasn't funded by the oat industry. I did look, that's important. But if you look at reference number 9, that's the first paper ever on oats and health, published in 1907 from Berlin. No, I didn't read it. It's in a book, it appears, fourth edition. Then you got to jump to 1963, reference 10, cholesterol lowering effect of rolled oats. So the amount of oats in the study, other than the fact you ate it 3 times a day, was not unreasonable. You could sustain yourself. There's adequate protein in oats, certainly adequate fiber, minerals, vitamins. but more reasonably, how about once a day? So when you talk to your patients and they're talking about a carnivore diet or the new food pyramid where maybe they want to do a steak for breakfast, or they want to do whole milk for breakfast, or they want to do lots and lots of eggs and bacon for breakfast, talk to them about oatmeal based on all the science, but this interesting new science. And when you're talking to your patients about diet, why don't you talk to them about what time of day to eat? So, in BMJ Medicine was a systematic review and meta-analysis effects of timing and eating duration of time-restricted eating on metabolic outcomes. So they looked at time-restricted eating. These were studies that were published, 41 randomized clinical trials lumped together in a meta-analysis, 2,300 participants. But the studies were different. Some people ate in a 6 hour window, 8 hour window, 12-hour window. Some people ate from an early morning window to mid afternoon or dinner time. Some people skipped breakfast, as is so popular, but maybe not healthy. And they would eat from lunch to later in the evening. And they looked at the outcome. And overall, this is the finding of the study. Overall, there was metabolic improvements with time-restricted eating in terms of some weight loss and some lowering of blood sugar, some lowering of fat mass. But when they compared different styles of TRE, time-restricted eating, of course, lots of the patients call it intermittent fasting, but the real official term for these restricted time windows is TRE, time-restricted eating. And I'm reading you can see it if you see my cursor, compared with late time-restricted eating, early time restricted eating, let's say 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. or something like that. Early time restricted eating significantly reduced body weight and fasting insulin concentrations, and the certainty of the evidence was high. Their conclusion, time restricted eating overall improves metabolic health outcomes compared with usual diets, and early time restricted eating was superior to late time restricted eating. The association between the duration of eating and metabolic health outcomes was inconsistent. So it is so common in my clinic when I talk to patients about their dietary patterns. Doc, I don't eat breakfast. I don't eat breakfast. I don't want breakfast. Without breakfast, I can get to lunch and, control my health a bit. And, for some people that works. But the amount of data that breakfast is a healthy meal and breakfast should not be skipped. And early morning eating lowers inflammation and stress and cortisol levels is very strong. And this is just one more piece of that data. Okay, are you ready for study number 3 here at HeartBrief? And it's a big one again. This was just published in the American Heart Association, the journal Circulation. The 2026 Heart Disease and Stroke Statistics, a report of the U.S. and global data from the American Heart Association, published this week. I don't see the exact date. It's not really crucial. But what this paper does in such exquisite depth was, number one, it established, unfortunately, that we still have the number one killer of men and women as heart disease. And that is distressing. The numbers are better, and deaths from heart disease have gone down, but it still remains the number one killer of men and women. The reason heart disease remains such a prevalent problem is there has been a rise in obesity since the last cut of the data. These actual data were from 2023. There were 915,973 total deaths from cardiovascular disease, including heart disease, stroke, hypertension, and heart failure, down from 941,000, so about 30,000 less or so, in 2022. So over the course of 1 year, about 30,000 less. And the rates of death per 100,000 people in 2023 were 218 compared to 224 the year before. So death rates are down, but still number one. Somebody dies of cardiovascular disease in 2023 every 34 seconds. Coronary heart disease, specifically myocardial infarction, clogged arteries, accounted for 350,000 deaths in 2023, down from 370,000 the year before. About every 2 people died of heart disease every 3 minutes in the United States. That's another way to describe it. Stroke actually contributed to 160,000 deaths in 2023, down a couple thousand from 2022. Somebody dies of stroke every 3 minutes and 14 seconds in the United States. But there was actually an increase in stroke death. There was an increase in obesity. There was an increase in blood pressure. There was an increase in diabetes. It was estimated that 47% of United States adults, 126 million, have high blood pressure, up from 122 million the year before. That 29.5 million United States adults have diabetes, up from 29.3. And about 50% of US adults have obesity or severe obesity, relatively similar to 2022. So we have a problem, NASA, as the famous Apollo movie said. We are still just drowning ourselves in cardiometabolic, cardio-kidney metabolic syndromes. They're resulting in atherosclerotic heart disease, congestive heart failure due to preserved or reduced ejection fraction, consequence of hypertensive heart disease, including aneurysms and rupture, and even dementia might be considered part of this atherosclerotic hypertensive metabolic axis that we're describing. So the American Heart Association looks forward, and I certainly do, one day when we can say we're no longer number one. We have so much work to do. Of course, the new food pyramid arguably will make an impact. I doubt it personally. The continued growth of GLP-1s and other agents of that type is making an impact already. But we need to get the basics back. Simple food, simple recipes, home cooking, regular exercise, good sleep, avoidance of toxins, no smoking, and see if we can actually teach people how to manage their lifestyle in a healthy, natural way. So that was HeartBrief. 3 really important articles for you here. Eat your breakfast early, eat your breakfast is real food. Check your blood pressure. These are messages for your patients, of course. And, I always favor more of a whole food, plant-based diet. There was major pushback in the last 10 days about the new food pyramid in many journals and newspapers and other places. Maybe we'll talk about that next week at HeartBrief. This is Joel Kahn. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening and learning with me.